Howdy y'all, the JTJ here, RollToWound.com. We're covering another Soulblight Gravelords Warscroll. Today we'll be looking at the Coven Throne, so stick around. Alright, diving right into the Coven Throne. We have 12 wounds. Its move is based off the damage table, which starts at 14, a 4-up save, and 10 bravery. If we're looking at the melee weapons, you have 4 different attacks. The first one is Predator Bite, 1 attack, 3/3, no rend, and D3 damage. Stiletto, 4 attacks, 3s, -1, 1 damage. The Needle Sharp Poniards and the Spectral Claws and Blades are both based off the damage table. The Needle Sharps, they hit on 3s, wound on 3s, 1 damage, and Spectral Claws, pretty standard, 5s and 4s. Description: the Coven Throne is a single model, ridden by a vampire lady armed with a Predator Bite and Stiletto. The model spectral hosts attack with their Spectral Claws and Blades. Companion, the model is accompanied by handmaidens who attack with their needle-sharp poniards. For rules purposes, they are treated the same as a mount. This model can fly. Abilities: the Hunger. At the end of combat, if any models are slain by attacks inflicted by this model's attack, you can heal up to D3 wounds allocated to this model. Frightful Touch. This is your standard Spectral Claws and Blades. All your ghosts, they're going to do mortal wounds on 6s to hit. Scrying Pool. Once per turn, you can reroll 1 hit roll or 1 wound roll for an attack made by this model, or 1 save roll for an attack that target this model. It's a very nice ability when you're trying to get that last model killed and you've got to make the count, the attack count. But I really like it for the save. I think that's where you're going to want to hold it off on, because those saves, when you're like, oh, I just got to roll a 3 up, and then it's D6 damage or something. So you really want to hold off, I think, personally, use this for the saves mostly. Magic, it is a wizard, and it does have a signature spell. Shudder. Shudder has a casting value of 6. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within 12 inches of the caster that is visible to them and roll 3d6. If the roll is greater than the unit's bravery characteristic, this model cannot be picked to be the target of any attacks made, spells cast, or abilities used by that unit until your next hero phase. So there's a couple rolls that have to go off. You have to cast it, and it doesn't have to be unbound. You have to be within 12 of that unit. Then you have to beat their bravery. Obviously, the lower bravery things are easier to beat. It's 3d6, so that's a pretty good roll. Your average is going to go up to 10 or so. Now remember, that unit can still target other things and do other things. It just can't do it to the Coven Throne. So, combo, hit something that you don't want messing with anything else, and then you drive the Coven Throne right into it, and they're pretty much stuck there. They can't do anything to it. They're just going to sit there. You can lock things down like this. You can lock the big scary Nagash or Archaon or something like that for their army. You can lock them down with this and let the rest of your army do what they need to do to score points and kill things, and then hopefully you can recast it your next things. If nothing else, they're going to have to retreat out. Of course, they could still shoot other things, or they could still cast spells at other things or use abilities to buffs other things, but they just can't affect the Coven Throne. Command abilities: Tactical Insight. Use this command ability at the start of your hero phase. If you do so, pick 1 friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12 of this model. Into your next hero phase, add a 1 to hit and wound rolls for attacks made by the unit. Add 1 to save rolls for attacks that target that unit. The same unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per phase. So you're picking a unit. They're going to get 1 to hit, plus 1 to wound, plus 1 save. You can use it on yourself if you're driving this in and you're going to hey, I'm going to go take on a a giant, or I'm going to go take on some big nasty that the enemy has brought. You can buff yourself up, and then also use Shudder just in the hopes that maybe Shudder doesn't go off, or maybe you want to do a little bit extra damage to that. I say throw it on some Blood Knights. Throw it on your Graveguard block. This is a great command ability. All right, keywords: Death, Vampire, Malignant, Soulblight Gravelords, Hero, Wizard, and Coven Throne. All right, the Coven Throne it costs 310. Notes: it's a Vampire, it's Malignant, it's a Hero, and it's a Wizard. All right, the max wound output is 27. It's pretty solid. Average is more like 6, so that's a big gap right there. Mostly that's coming because there is a D3 variable there, and there's also the mortal wounds from the spectral claws and blades. So you could count on it to do 5 to 10 wounds on average, on pretty much every turn. But if you really spiked hard, you could get 20. Thoughts: it's a 4-weapon profile, so something that gives an extra attack that's going to give it to all of those profiles, which is very good. Not great average damage, but good amount of attacks. Nice for low armor units. So if you run into something with a bad save, pack of zombies, some other fodder, it's going to do some work. It's not really sort of tooled up to take out those high armor 2+ rerolling 1 saves. It's not going to go through that. But if you got some low save stuff, it can do some work. The good: 14-inch move at full health. It can fly. Big base for backline buffing. Great spell, great command ability, and it has the hunger, which we know that some things with vampire keywords don't have it. Thank goodness this does. The bad: it's only a 4+ save, so you don't get your 3-up vampire save. Enemy shooting will target this if they know what they're doing. They'll want to kill this quick because this is a force multiplier. It's one of the best force multipliers we have. So just keep that in mind with positioning. With some of the best abilities of any unit in the book, the Coven Throne is great buffing here. They can also do a bit of frontline fighting. I don't think that this has to be solely a behind-the-line unit. You can get in there and mix it up, but you just make sure you're picking and choosing your battles because you want this to live. It's more valuable as a buff than it is a frontline fighter, but if need be, it can rush in and take out a little unit or so. Works nicely in mini builds. So it's not something where I took a bunch of zombies, I can't take this, or I took a bunch of dire wolves, I can't take this. It's got the speed to keep up with dire wolves. It's got it can buff your zombies. It does really great with Graveguard. It can keep up with Blood Knights, so it can go in any kind of build you're looking at. Shudder can lock an enemy heavy hitter down. Now, of course, this isn't guaranteed, but at least you get to cast that prior and already know, oh, I've cast it, I've shut them down, I'm going to charge in and just make them sit there. Obviously, if you don't get that cast off and you don't beat that bravery score, then you're going to have to pick and choose whether you're going to rush in to fight them. But it is a very, very good tactical. It has tactical use. Yeah, go buy one. They've been sold out for a little bit, but if you can find one, I think they're worth a buy. All right, looking at some of the bloodlines here, we're going to go Legion of Blood. It does have vampire keywords, so the battle traits of Immortal Majesty work with the extra D3 fleeing. Great for taking on those low bravery chaff units that should be taking on all the time anyway. That's what you should be targeting. And if you do 5 or 6 wounds to them, something runs, extra D3. No negative modifier on Death Rattle and 12, plus an extra 1 to save with Tactical Insight. 4+ Great Weapon Graveguard. So that's kind of good. Something to think about. If we're doing a buff build, Aristocracy of Blood, it can reroll charge rolls for Legion of Blood units while they're wholly within 12. And the Obelette. That's the anti-wizard one. You could also look at Soulbound Garments to add one of the save rolls for attack that target this bearer. It just depends on what you're trying to do. So we got a buff build. If you're deciding, hey, I want to keep this behind the lines, it's going to be my general, I want to keep it alive. You can go with Aristocracy of Blood to give your friendly units within 12 reroll charges, and Obelette, so you can get that extra type of dispel for enemy casters. So that's something to look at if you're just like, hey, I want to keep it behind the line. I want to help my guys out, sort of debuff the enemy. It can also do a tank build. I don't want to call it a frontline fighter build because I really like the Coven Throne as a tank and trying to keep it alive. If you're doing that, you take Aura of Dark Majesty, which subtract 1 from hit rolls with melee weapons, and a Soulbound Garment, add 1 to save. So you're going to be -1 to hit, +1 to save all the time. All right, Legion of Night. You could use the Coven Throne to outflank with some Blood Knights. It could be sort of their support unit that's going to outflank with those guys. Buff builds, if you're going to keep this behind the line and buff things, Unbending Will. Do not take Battle Shock tests for Legion of Night units wholly within 12. One of the best command traits. Morbeg's Claw, so you make it immobile, but it's going to give it a +2 to casting. If you're going to go with a tank build, Terrifying Visage is going to subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target this general. And Shard of Night. Shard of Night is ignore rend characteristic of missile weapons when making saves for attacks for this. So those are helping it stay alive. The trick you could do is you could put above suspicion on it to make it deep strike. So basically you could take Vargas, which are battle line, deep strike them down, deep strike the Coven Throne next to them, and actually buff them, make them better. Because you need to do something to make Vargas better. I wouldn't actually suggest doing that, but it is something you could do. All right, we got the Vikros Dynasty. The battle traits both work with the Coven Throne. You're going to get your +1 to wound for Death Rattle and Dead Walkers, and you're going to get your reroll castings. So think about your Grave Guard. They're going to be if you put Tactical Insight on them, +2 to wound. Yes, I know it can only go +1, but +2 to wound, +1 to hit, and +1 to save. You can reroll casting. It helps with Shudder because you want to get that. You're going to want to get that spell off a lot of times. The build I like is Pack Alpha. You'll get a free command ability without spending a point, because with Tactical Insight, you're going to want to use that every single turn. Even if you have no one else around, you put it on the Coven Throne. So every turn, Tactical Insight needs to be cast, and this allows you to do that for free. Arcane Tome is also maybe the artifact that I'll look at, and the reason why that'll give it an extra cast. And then you can put Mystic Shield on self, or if you take Pinions for your signature spell, you can give it 6 extra inches of movement. So those are things to think about there. Soulblight Dynasty. It can keep up with your Blood Knights. Power in the Blood, Swift and Deadly. So Power in the Blood is if an enemy unit is destroyed within 6 inches of this general gains the relative command ability from Might of the Crimson Keep battle trait. I like this because if this is going to be traveling around with your Blood Knights and buffing them and helping them out, you take Power in the Blood, and all of a sudden you're going to start adding the 1 to the damage characteristic. Add 1 to the wounds and add the speed, and it might not even have to be doing the work. The Blood Knights could actually be the ones doing the Swift and Deadly is also something you could look at. You can reroll charge rolls for friendly Soulblight Dynasty units while they are wholly in 12. So if you are driving this around with a lot of Blood Knights to buff them, maybe you take that so you make sure you get those charges off. Rousing Commander is another viable option, because Rousing Commander, you're going to, once per battle at the start of the combat phase, you can say the general rouse the warriors. If you do so until the end of that phase, friendly Soulblight Dynasty vampires units wholly within 12 of this general benefit from the bloody strength and stolen vitality abilities and the Might of the Crimson Keep. So if you're really trying to put together a sort of a bomb unit, maybe the Coven Throne and 3 units of Blood Knights, that might be something you want to take and just put all your eggs in one basket and hope you wipe out the enemy unit in one go. I use it as a mobile buffing platform. One of the best ways to buff Blood Knights that we have, because it can keep up. Tactical Insight's great, and you can also cast a spell on them if you needed to. If you didn't want to use Shudder, you can put a Mystic Shield on some units. All right, on to the Avangori. I would not make the Coven Throne the general in this bloodline, but it would still work in an Avangori army or a list. Tactical insight on a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon or Terrorgeist is very good. So don't disregard that that potential for buffs right there. If I did take something, I possibly take Master of Magic to help it cast Shudder, because maybe that's what you do here. You use this to be the platform where you go lock up the big baddie from the enemy, while your Terrorgeist, your zombie dragons, they sort of kill everything else, and then when they're done with that, they can turn around and handle their big baddie. Not a bad option for a second hero in this bloodline. If somebody took it, I wouldn't be like, that's a horrible idea. It can keep up with everything. It can buff everything. So I think it's pretty viable. All right. Looking at the grades for Shudder. Shudder, I'm giving an A plus with good positioning. You can lock enemy heavy hitters down. Nagash, Archaon. If they run a giant, if they have a Maul Crusher, something that you know is going to rip through your army or give you a lot of trouble, you pretty much just take the Coven Throne and said, you go deal with that. Of course, once again, you have to be able to cast those. You have to be able to roll over their leadership. But it's one of the best ways or best things we have in this book that can handle things like that. Just locking stuff down and saying, I'm not even going to deal with you. You're just going to sit there. I'm going to give that an A+. It's got a decent low casting, and it's got an okay range. Unit rating, A+. So really good. I've given out, I don't give out A's on everything, and I don't even know if I've given out an A+ yet on any Warscroll. But this, I think, honestly deserves it. Look for ways to keep it alive or help it cast. If you're building this out and you're doing your command trace and your artifacts, look at ways that you can say, hey, I want my Coven Throne to be alive until the end of the game, or I want to be able to help it cast Shudder if I'm going to use it more in that role. One of the best spells and command abilities in the game. I honestly believe that Shudder is really, really good, and if it's used properly, it's really nice. Tactical Insight is a really good command ability. The only keyword missing is monster. If this had monster keyword, it would be super good. And that might have, you said, hey, if something brings this down, I wish it had a 3-up save, and I wish it had a monster keyword. If it had those two things, it's hands down an A+. But I still think it has that potential. If used right, it's a game changer. So I just think that it can work in any dynasty. It can work in any build, and it's pointed at a point where it's not. You don't have to build around it your whole army, but you can definitely fit it into a lot of lists. So there you have it. There's my thoughts on the Coven Throne. Tell me what you agree with. Should it be an A+? Should it be lower? Tell me how you use it in your army. Tell me what you think the best use for it on the table are. I'd like to know. Once again, thanks for watching, and y'all be good.